Before we start, pay attention. Every time you spot trivia in this video, keep counting. Comment the final number, stay subscribed, and you could win an Amazon gift card this month. Subscribed? Good. Let's go. The armored truck deflects the bullets raining on it. Guided by their tech ally, the mechanic rams into the gates despite the heavy firing. Two men lift a bazooka to shoot the intruders, but the mechanic blasts them. He drives the vehicle into the garage, taking the other guards down as he moves. Inside, he clears the floor in brutal close combat while the detective sweeps the garage, sneaking up and cutting down any guard in sight. A detective named Boswell infiltrates a crime boss's compound to rescue his captured partner. While he's taking down the guards, Dante, the crime boss, allows his girlfriend to finish the captive off. When Boswell arrives, he finds his partner dead. While the detective investigates Dante and his operations weeks later, a mechanic named Tony arrives at his late father's garage. His younger brother, Bobby, pulls up in a Ferrari and convinces him to take it for a drive. Tony questions how he could afford such a car, but his question turns the mood in the car sour. He notices a car behind them, and Bobby speeds up while trying to outrun the car chasing them. He swerves to avoid a truck and crashes into a parked vehicle. Tony wakes up inside Dante's office and learns that the Ferrari was stolen from him. As punishment, Dante inflates the value of the car to $28 million and asks Tony to choose between working for him or ending Bobby's life. When the boss pulls out a gun, he flashes back to the day his other brother accidentally shot himself. He dares the boss to shoot him, but the trigger clicks on an empty chamber. Dante laughs in his face,
Congratulations, you lived.
tells him to report the next day for his first job, and shows him Bobby's ring as proof of his capture. Tony returns home to his two daughters, Sarah and Sunshine. He cleans his wounds quietly the next morning and walks in on his daughters as they prepare for school. He then swings by the cafe to meet Cheryl, his barrister friend. She notices his injuries, but he avoids answering her questions. He arrives at Dante's office as instructed, where he is given an address and told to handle a situation. Outside the building, he grips his spanner, unaware that Boswell is watching him from afar. Tony disables the men standing guard outside, walks inside to knock out the others, and frees the captives. He uses one man's phone to call an ambulance for the injured. Then he leaves. Boswell runs his license plate and begins digging into his background. Tony returns to the garage and behaves as usual. He thanks Eduardo, a loyal employee who stayed to help run the family business. He goes back home, jokes around with his girls, and retreats to his room to stare at his late wife's photo. A message summons him to Dante's office. Another location, another group of captives. He handles it the same way, but this time sets the property on fire after clearing the building.
All right, ladies, time to go.
Boswell reviews Tony's file and finds an ex-military record with no criminal history, but he still insists that something doesn't add up. Tony admits to Cheryl at the cafe that Bobby is being held hostage and explains that he must complete a few jobs to keep him alive. She warns him that men like Dante are dangerous people and gives him her spare keys in case he finds himself needing a place to stay. When he leaves, Boswell approaches Cheryl. She pretends not to know anything about Dante's connection to Tony, so he leaves his card and asks her to call if she remembers something useful. The detective visits the garage the following day. He questions Tony directly about Dante and warns him that his cooperation can only last so long. Tony denies knowing anything, and a call interrupts the conversation. The next order is different. Dante tells him to murder a traitor. When he arrives at the target's home, he sees him with his family. He calls the boss, refuses to carry out the execution, and threatens to go after him if he touches Bobby. Furious, Dante orders his men to teach Tony a lesson. By the time Tony reaches home to get the girls, gunmen open fire on the house. Shots tear through the walls, and as Sarah runs towards her dad, she gets targeted. While Tony tries to keep her awake, the house catches fire. Emergency services arrive, and he remembers his other daughter is still inside. He tries to rush back inside for her, but gets restrained. Boswell arrives at the scene and sees him on his knees. An officer pulls the detective aside to show him something. Dante goes mental in his office and shoots one of his own men for acting without orders. He wanted control, not chaos. Now the mechanic has nothing to lose. During the funeral, Cheryl asks about Tony, but Eduardo tells her he needs time. Eduardo meets Tony in his car and hands him a flask. He shares a story about his own parents, murdered in a random street robbery. He then advises him to channel his anger into fighting the evil in the world. Tony takes the advice literally and begins training again. He attacks a man connected to the crime boss in public, but when a bystander intervenes in the situation, he runs away. When the police arrive, Boswell questions the witness and gives her his card. The detective meets Cheryl and says he wants to help. She tells him to understand Tony's grief first, but he says pushing him away will not fix anything. Tony spots Bobby leaving the boss's office and follows him. Bobby notices he's being followed, so he pulls over to confront his chaser. Fear grips him when he sees Tony, and he begins apologizing for conniving with Dante. As Tony attacks him in anger, he confesses his jealousy and resentment towards him. He reveals that he always felt abandoned when he needed help, and their father compared them constantly. Tony relents, and the two brothers both admit their faults. They agree to fix what they started, unaware that Dante's thug is watching them. Bobby explains that Dante's weakness is money, so they make a list of his businesses. Tony sends his brother and Eduardo to a safe house while he raids these businesses. He storms into one of the boss's clubs and destroys the surveillance system while the boss watches. At the safe house, gunmen arrive, and Eduardo triggers a smoke trap. While Bobby attacks the thugs in the front, another muscle man sneaks up on Eduardo. Bobby takes down the outside attackers and sees Eduardo being held at gunpoint. To save Eduardo from being shot, he allows the men to capture him. Tony visits Cheryl that night to tell her he has willed the garage to her in case anything happens to him. She tells him to trust the detective, but he leaves without promising anything. The boss moves to secure a major laundering deal at another club. Tony breaks in and disrupts the meeting. Chaos erupts, but the boss escapes through a back exit and orders retaliation on the garage. Boswell arrives at the garage to warn Tony about Dante and tell him about his partner, who was murdered by the same man. He hands over a file detailing properties and all public information about Dante. Thugs open fire on the garage, and one worker gets injured. When Boswell returns fire on the thugs, they retreat. The boss complains about Tony's stubbornness, so his girlfriend volunteers to take him out herself. She arrives at the cafe, and one of her musclemen sneaks up on Tony. As he deals with his attacker, and Cheryl walks in on Dante's girlfriend. She smacks her and aims at Tony. He dodges all the bullets, and when she finally has him cornered, she realizes her gun is empty. One of the men drags her away, warning that the cops have arrived. While Bobby is being dealt with at Dante's office, Tony consoles Cheryl over the traumatic experience. With Eduardo's help, workers reinforce Tony's truck into a makeshift armored vehicle. Eduardo hands him an earpiece and tells him to tap it whenever he needs help. Dante calls Tony and orders him to come to the office alone if he wants Bobby to remain alive. Tony takes the Battlemobile for a spin the following day to test its abilities. He then returns to the shop to thank his workers and Cheryl for their help. Tony picks up Boswell on the highway and activates the truck's combat system, reinforced panels sliding into place as they approach the compound. Dante's thugs trigger the intruder alarm, and guards line the gates, holding weapons. Bullets hammer against the armored car without effect. Guided by Eduardo from the safe house, Tony crashes through the entrance. While the others attack the intruders, two guards ready a bazooka, but Tony takes them down prior to them firing. He pushes straight into the garage despite the gunfire showering them from every direction. They activate the vehicle guns and shoot down the firing squad. The duo exits the vehicle, while Tony takes care of the guards inside. Boswell covers and neutralizes the outer guards with controlled precision. Tony drags one attacker from behind cover and overpowers him inside the garage, while Bobby frees himself from restraint. He joins the fight, taking down the men sent to execute him. Tony finds himself getting overpowered by a thug, so he taps his earpiece. Eduardo spots him through a camera angle and sends a hidden bullet that drops the man, overpowering Tony. Boswell rejoins him, only for Tony to step into a shot meant for the detective. They keep moving regardless, and together they clear out the remaining thugs. Boswell urges him toward Dante's office. A final guard lunges from the hallway, but Tony knocks him unconscious and advances. Bobby slips behind two armed men near the entrance and barely manages to disable them. Dante's girlfriend blocks Tony in front of the office. She attacks him, and Tony plays along for a bit until he pushes her aside. Dante emerges with a gun drawn, and as he taunts Tony, a single shot echoes. Dante collapses, and Bobby is seen aiming a gun. Tony walks over to his brother and commends him for his bravery. Cheryl hears movement outside her home and finds Tony unconscious in his car. She wakes him up, and when he exits the car, she impulsively kisses him. Tony visits his daughter's graves some days later. Footsteps approach from behind, and he turns to see Boswell walking forward with Sunshine, his younger daughter, beside him. She breaks into a run and embraces her father tightly. He approaches the detective, and Boswell explains that during the fire, a cop dragged him aside to show him that one of the girls survived, but he had to keep her hidden for her protection until Dante's network was dismantled. Tony thanks him, and when the detective leaves, Cheryl joins them. Tony introduces her to his daughter. Hand in hand, they leave the cemetery and walk toward a future free of Dante and his men. Losing two daughters at once awakens Tony's hunger for vengeance, so he teams up with Detective Boswell to take down Dante. Now that he's discovered that one of his daughters is alive, would you consider this a happy ending or not? But the main question is, how many trivia did you count? Don't forget to comment.